Welcome to the Pot.Live podcast. I'm your host, Lenny G. This podcast is all about connecting the community with the thought leaders of business and entertainment in the cannabis industry. As this industry expands and becomes more and more mainstream, we want to educate and entertain our listeners and become your choice and voice for all things cannabis. Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show. If you are into the recreational side of the cannabis industry, yes, stoners, I'm talking to you, then thepot.com is the online and mobile destination for you. That's right, THEPOT.com, thepot.com. Where else can you find the exclusive pot made of the month? Take a pot quiz and win prizes. Scroll through hilarious memes and jokes and check out the latest podcasts, news, and trends, all while having your own profile and voice in the pot.com forum. Visit thepot.com today and get lit. Welcome to another episode of the Pot Live podcast. I am your host, Lenny G, and we have Mr. Matthew Carr back again. We had him on a couple of months ago. He is the Chief Trend Strategist. Hope I got that right, for the Oxford Club. Matthew, welcome to the show again.
Hey, thanks for having me, Len.
Awesome.
It's great to be back.
Great. So anyone who's listening, last time Matthew was on, he had a couple of recommendations, although we don't like to say that. We're not telling you to invest in these stocks. This is the whole disclaimer thing I'm supposed to say. We're not telling you to invest. If you make money with some of the information you get here, great. If you lose money, we don't want to hear about it. So anyway, Matthew, thanks for being on the show. We're going to hit on some of the same securities that we talked about last time and maybe throw some new ones in there. But first, let's start with a quick little 30-second background for people that didn't hear the last episode you were on. Tell everybody who you are.
Yeah, okay. So I'm the Chief Trend Strategist for the Oxford Club. We are a financial publishing group based out of Baltimore. What I focus on is cannabis, as well as any sort of new industry. So we talk about 5G, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, data centers, EVs, all that kind of stuff. Anything that's new and exciting, that's in my wheelhouse. That's what I focus on. And I've been covering the cannabis industry for several years now. First, preparing investors for the legalization nationwide in Canada back a couple of years ago. So that's my focus in this industry. And that's why I'm very excited about this industry, because I think there's a lot of potential upside here, especially once prohibition ends.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, we're so happy to have you back on, and hopefully we're going to do this every month or two just to get updates on what's going on in your world so we can help our listeners maybe be more educated.
Yeah, more than welcome to.
All right, great. So let's start with one thing that's not about the stocks in particular, but how about that the House lawmakers are preparing for a September floor vote on legislation which is called the MORE Act, which is the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act. Tell us what your thoughts are about that. Can that be a first step towards hopefully legalization in the not too distant future? Who knows?
Yeah, so the House has been pretty progressive over the last couple of years in trying to pursue legalization or some sort of working towards decriminalization of cannabis. So last year they did pass the Safe Banking Act. That was the first measure that looks to kind of roll back prohibition on cannabis to, one, pass a committee vote, but then also to pass a floor vote. That was a big step forward, and that also allows cannabis companies something that seems pretty, I guess, makes a lot of sense to most of us. That would be allowing them access to the same banking infrastructure that every other industry enjoys in this country. Now, that passed the House, died in the Senate. They tried to tag it into the coronavirus stimulus package. You know, that created some issues and back in May. So the MORE Act, I believe, will definitely pass the House. There has a lot of momentum there. I believe you can see a little bit of a tailwind for U.S. cannabis stocks because of that passage. But since Harris is one of the lead co-sponsors on this bill, I have low expectations that it goes anywhere in the Senate. I think it would end up stalling just like the Safe Banking Act did. You know, Safe Banking Act passed all the way back in September, almost a year ago, and it just has not gained any momentum because of that opposition from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and others. So we're always hopeful. I think this is another step forward. I think it's another step on that path to seeing some change at the federal level within the next couple of years. But I do think it will be a big uphill battle to go beyond the House, just because of anything, but because of Harris's relationship with the bill itself.
Yeah, it's crazy that, I mean, well, first of all, the year is crazy, obviously, right? We're recording this on August 31st, just for anyone who's listening, 2020. But the fact that the opposition is so, what's the word? I guess hateful against each other, both sides, that anything that's passed in one will be rejected in the other just out of principle, and it has nothing to do with the validity of the act. It's just so silly. And I was hoping that this year, marijuana legalization would be, a big debate topic during the presidential election, but there's so much other stuff going on that it kind of all got pushed to the side and nobody's really talking about it. Hopefully, I think there's seven states on the ballot, I believe, maybe more, for legalization.
So I think that will be one of the big driving forces in the near term, because I know there are 5 straight up that have ballot measures. Arizona for adult use, Montana for adult use, New Jersey for adult use. Then you have Mississippi for medicinal, and then South Dakota for measures for both. And then you have Pennsylvania, where the governor is pushing for legalization, that the legislators do something. So that's going to be that continued momentum from the state level. Maybe the federal government kind of steps back for a little bit. The current administration with Jeff Sessions and everything, who is very anti-cannabis, that's been difficult for the industry. But I think election night is going to be a big night for this country for a number of different reasons, because there is such a bifurcated sort of populace at the moment, but because of all of these issues, industry specific to cannabis, because not only if, let's say, Biden-Harris win, that's a massive tailwind for the cannabis industry. Let's say the Democrats take the Senate, that's a huge tailwind for the industry. All of these states that, if these ballot measures pass, that's another massive tailwind for the industry, because the industry has done exceptionally well already this year, and in spite of COVID-19. And there's some, and I'll just take on this for a second. There's a part of the story with COVID-19 and the pandemic we haven't really heard anybody talk about too much. I have heard it from CEOs of cannabis companies that they believe COVID-19 impacted the illicit market more so than any other industry, because there was this curtailing of travel, because everybody was watching, everybody was stuck at home. A lot of this smuggling or anything like that hasn't taken place. And the big winner has been the legal cannabis industry. That I talk to CEOs that they know something has happened, that COVID-19, the pandemic, impacted that illicit market, because they can see it in the number of customers that have come over and how they're talking. And then they are now realizing that, hey, this is a legal, safe industry that I can continue to purchase from it, and I don't have to go back towards that illicit market. So that's it's a very interesting year, and the next couple of months are going to be very exciting and potentially huge for the cannabis industry itself.
Yeah, so you hit on a few things there I wanted to cover. So perfect segue. So a lot of the companies, like you mentioned, are doing way better during this COVID pandemic. And a lot of them are the ones that have adapted to a delivery model as opposed to only walk-ins. Since the walk-in traffic is a lot lower, they're either doing curbside pickup or they're doing delivery. I know that, and we can jump right into a few stocks that I wanted to talk about. One of them is Trulieve down here in the Southeast where I'm located. They announced that they went to a huge delivery model, and their stock has gone through the roof in the last couple of months. So did you have any thoughts on that general feeling of going into a delivery model? As Amazon, Walmart are all capitalizing on this. In the regular world, in the cannabis world, certain companies are capitalizing that as well, one Trulieve being one of them.
So I actually just had this conversation with Eric Moff from Juicy just a couple of weeks ago. I talked about how anybody during this pandemic, if you didn't order from Amazon before, you have started ordering now. If you were ordering before, you have started ordering even more so. The same thing as we've seen that the impact on groceries for delivery and curbside pickup has increased dramatically. And I was talking to Eric Moff about how I started ordering alcohol over the internet, right? That you could have it shipped to your home. And I was like, wow, this is a really great opportunity. It takes out this extra kind of sort of errand. Plus the selection was good and the prices were good. And I was like, I'm not really quite sure I'm ever going to go back to going into a liquor store. I might. So he was saying that the idea of continuing on, that making delivery and curbside pickup would be huge for the industry. That yes, you can order your groceries. Yes, you can order food or anything else you want from Amazon. But the fact that you can order alcohol and have it delivered to your home, this is an opportunity where cannabis should be allowed to do that. So I do think that's something that will ultimately be permanent. Now, Trulieve, in and of itself, that is a company that I think beyond just delivery has, I think I talked about it last time I was on your show, that their approach I really enjoyed, right? So you're talking about a company that has 57 dispensaries, 55 of those are in Florida, right? Florida will be a $1 billion market. It is right now completely medicinal. And the fact that that company is the number one company in terms of quarterly revenue, $120 million this most recent quarter, that's huge. That shows not only the opportunity that exists in these big states like Florida, but that exists across this country as we continue to expand out. Now, they also have a much better cash position than a lot of other companies. So it's very interesting. And I know right now, like there's some kind of talk that Trulieve would maybe merge with Green Thumb, like Green Thumb would buy out Trulieve. I wouldn't be happy with that. That's what I'll say. Because I think Trulieve is a great opportunity. The stock has done exceptionally well this year, which I'm very happy for. But I think the U.S. market is so large that you have this opportunity for multiple majors to exist. That there can be a Trulieve, there can be a Green Thumb, there can be a Curaleaf, a Cresco. All these big companies that can take up these big, massive footprints, and then you can have these other smaller players exist as well. So I would not like to see that Trulieve or Green Thumb merger, especially with the talks right now, that it would be like maybe a 30 to 40% premium over its current price, because I think there's a lot more upside for Trulieve as it continues to expand, because everybody else was expanding to as many markets as possible. Trulieve focused on dominating just one, which is one of the largest in this country, but dominating on that one and then continuing to expand. So that's why I like Trulieve, and I also like this delivery curbside pickup, which I think should be permanent and will ultimately be permanent for the industry, and everybody will support that.
Now, do you think that Trulieve, the possible merger, is already priced in? I think right now, today, and when we're recording this, it's about 22 or 23 bucks, up from the 10-ish level a few months ago. Is this something that's still a good investment in your eyes, or do you think it's let's see where it shakes out first?
I think this is actually still a very good investment. I think last time we were talking right around the first quarter earnings. Green Thumb was the first cannabis company to ever report more than $100 million in quarterly revenue. I thought Curaleaf, Trulieve would be the next two to do it. Now, that didn't happen that quarter, but we saw in the most recent quarter that Trulieve, 109% year-over-year increase in revenue to this $120 million. I think there's still a lot of upside potential there. So I don't think this stock has topped out quite yet. I think there's still a lot more upside. Like I said, I'd be upset with that 30 to 40% premium, because I think there's a lot more for Trulieve to go, because this is one of those really well-managed companies that has focused on just a singular market and being very good in that market.
Now, but before I hit you with a couple of more individual stocks, do you think that a lot of people are investing and there's been a run-up? Is it just because the businesses are doing well? Or do you think that people are thinking there's a possible Biden victory, which can lead to some of those items you mentioned earlier, and that's why they're jumping on now?
Well, I think a couple of situations where we are rebounding from this devastating bear market that we had for the longest bear market, the deepest bear market in the industry's history. Last year, all the way into that bottom back in March. So I think we're rebounding from that. I think those shares are still continuing to be priced well. I don't think anything is super overpriced in the cannabis industry because we know that the growth over the next couple of years is going to continue to be pretty robust. I also believe people will look at certain stocks and let's say talk about like the Robinhood crowd. Well, I don't think the American MSOs are having that kind of hit because Robinhood doesn't allow OTC trading, and all of these American MSOs, which are great companies, which are the largest operators in the cannabis space in terms of revenue, still trade over the counter. And so that's only available to those investors with like traditional brokerage accounts. So I don't think that there's too much oversold or overbought in the industry at the moment because I do think we have this upside. Now, with that election on the horizon, I don't think the cannabis companies are actually predicting a Biden-Harris win. I don't think yet. I think we learned anything from the last election. You got to wait until the end because I know last election, one of the investment thesis was to go along, let's say, gun makers, because if Clinton won, gun makers would jump because gun sales always increase during a Democrat presidency. And if you look back and what happened on that night when Trump was announced the victor, gun manufacturers collapsed, and we've actually seen some of them report bankruptcies in the subsequent years. So I don't think we're seeing the Biden-Harris victory yet because I think this is going to be a very difficult election all the way to the final minute. So I think there's a lot of upside. And like I said earlier, I think if they did win, you would see shares of those companies completely take off. They'd be like fired out of gun. They'd be setting new all-time highs.
Yeah, I agree as well with everything you said. All right, so let's talk about one of our mutual faves, and it became a favorite of mine because of you. So a few months ago, we on the episode, you talked about GrowGeneration, and GrowGeneration wasn't widely known. Then it started running up from about, I think, $6 or $7 is where it was at when we last spoke. It shot all the way up to the teens, and then Kramer on Mad Money gave it a little 2-day in a row pop with 2 features on the company, and it shot up to like $22, I believe. Then it started coming down. So I actually, and I'll just tell my personal experience, and then I want to get your feedback. I bought it at about $7, rode it all the way up to 22, and then when I saw it start coming back down, I sold a good portion between 18 and 20. And kept like 100% return. I cashed out, and then I kept some shares as gravy, just play money going forward. I wanted to see where it bottomed out. It went all the way down to 13. Now it's sitting between 15 and 16 for the last week or so. There was some questions as to the validity of the management of the company. Then that was, found out to not be true, and it looked like the shorts were just getting control of it after it peaked. Tell me about your thoughts about the run-up, the decline, and where you see it in the future.
Well, GrowGeneration was my number one small cap stock for 2020. This is what I talked about earlier in the year. I'm very happy with how it's performed. I still think there's a lot to go here. I mean, we're talking about a company that is the largest hydroponic operator in the United States and has opened the largest hydroponic store in the U.S. But what you've seen in that run-up, especially in that big 40% plus jump on earnings recently, was the fact that the company is outperforming even the most optimistic expectations, right? So you're talking about revenue was the GrowGeneration forecast revenue between 130 to 135 million for the year. They raised it to 185 to 195 million, then raised 2021 forecast to 260 million. So that's a lot of upside. We're talking about 50 stores by the end of 2021 is what they're looking at, up from 28 now, and you could have as many as 90 over the next couple of years. So I think this is an opportunity that it is tied to cannabis. Now, they didn't start out with that being their focus. They just are a benefactor of cannabis is expanding across the United States. And as cannabis continues to enter new markets, to new states, as the states that it exists in continue to expand, well, GrowGeneration is going to continue to benefit from that because that is the industry that uses most of its products.
Now, let me interrupt you, Matthew, just for the novice investor that's possibly listening to this or intermediate, whatever it may be. Talk about the difference in this play versus buying a Trulieve, a retail outlet in strictly cannabis, as opposed to a pick and shovel play or a supplier of what all those retail outlets may use for the grow facilities with a GrowGeneration.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why I love GrowGeneration as a cannabis play, because one, it's not plant touching, right? So its biggest customers are Acreage, Cresco Labs, Curaleaf, Harvest Health, and Recreation. Those are the companies that are out there growing the product. They're plant-based touching. GrowGeneration, it's just providing equipment for them to operate. So it doesn't have the same restrictions as a cannabis or a multi-state operator in the US does. That's why GrowGeneration can trade on the NASDAQ, whereas a Trulieve, it trades on OTC or over the counter here in the United States, because in the US, cannabis is still illegal at the federal level. So a lot of the exchanges won't allow them to uplist to the NYSE or the NASDAQ. The only companies that do get uplisted are part suppliers or anybody in the supply chain, like a GrowGeneration. So Green Lane would be another one that provides vaporizer parts. They can list on NASDAQ. GrowGeneration can list on NASDAQ. A cannabis touching company like Trulieve, Cresco, those all can't at the moment until something changes at the federal level in the US. Now, the opportunity that you have from a GrowGeneration versus a Trulieve is you have all the upside of this market expansion with none of the downside. So you have none of the tax issues, you have none of the threat from the federal government coming in. Plus, its other side of its business is also farmers and just at-home gardeners. So you can see that opportunity is pretty massive. So I like GrowGeneration. It's in competition with what Scotts Miracle grows, Hawthorne gardening segment. And those are the two that I'll follow really closely. So Scotts usually reports before GrowGeneration. That is always going to give you a good read on what to expect from GrowGeneration's next report. And so when I saw that Scotts Generation report a couple weeks before, had that big jump in shares because you saw that big increase in Hawthorne revenue, I knew it was going to be just a field day for GrowGeneration and their investors. Now, I wasn't expecting 42% increase or whatever, how it ended on that day, but I was expecting a big jump. And I like these pick and shovel plays for the long term because they give you this multifaceted exposure to a bunch of different companies in the space. And like I said, the benefit as it expands, they expand their operations. So we're talking, like I said, 28 to 50 stores to 90 just over the next couple of years. And that's something that I don't think you should ignore as an investor.
Right. And that's all great tips right there. All right. So let's jump to the opposite end of the spectrum. And let's just update on the big three in Canada: Canopy, Tilray, Aurora. Their stock prices are very strange. Obviously, we talked about it last time that they got smashed after running up a couple of years ago. And then they tried to recover a little bit, but they've just been lagging. What are your thoughts on those from an investment point of view, and any thoughts from a company point of view? I know they're Canadian companies and you like the US ones, but tell me your thoughts there.
Well, I still, so Canopy, that is a company I do like. When you're looking at not just the US, but the global cannabis market, Canopy has the largest footprint there. I think everybody should have some exposure to Canopy just because it's like Walmart or Target or Amazon in the space, right? It's your big blue chip player that has deep pockets, that has a massive footprint, that has every single celebrity that you can possibly imagine. Martha Stewart, Snoop Dogg, Seth Rogen, all of that's underneath their umbrella. And so I do like Canopy. Aurora and Euphoria, they're a little bit smaller right now for a lot of the Canadian companies. As we're doing this build out of Cannabis 2.0, their derivative products, the thing that we're watching there, or the thing that's really impacting those shares, is those increasing losses, because a lot of this stuff requires more capital investment, because you're trying to expand across the country. You're trying to build out all of your supply chains, and that's weighing on them. Now, at the same time, you launched Cannabis 2.0 products in October 2019. Basically, they weren't going to be available in a lot of places until December, right into the teeth of the pandemic. So that has kind of hurt them a little bit more than, let's say, the American MSOs. The American MSOs have proven to be what we had kind of hoped, that these sort of vice plays or recession plays, that they would do well regardless of the economic situation, that even during a recession or a downturn, that you would see actually an increase in consumption. And that is what you've seen here in the United States. So I still like the American MSOs more than the Canadian LPs at the moment. But I still, like I said, would have that exposure to Canopy, because I do think that is just one of that will ultimately be a big blue chip. It's always circling, hovering right outside the United States. It's waiting for something to change at the federal level so that it can go ahead and charge in and start buying up something.
Got it. All right. So let's switch now to an American company or stock that I know you've written about in the past that I think you like, but I want to get your feelings on it. A unique play is Planet 13. So they're more like a Dave & Buster's superstore out in Nevada. Can you tell us a little bit about that company and your thoughts on that versus the share price that I think it's in the mid threes now, but it's had a nice little run there from a lower price stock. Tell us about that.
So Planet 13 is actually one of those companies that I do like. Bob Groesbeck, the CEO, he's very generous with his time and has talked to me in the past on several occasions. I will, in all honesty, the Superstore Planet 13 in Las Vegas is my favorite dispensary in the country. I've talked about that. It's a very cool experience. It's very big. There's a lot of different aspects going on with it, and that is their model, right? So their model, like you said, is to be this Dave & Buster's, to continue to expand to new markets, but with this idea of the Superstore. And it works. I mean, Las Vegas is definitely the perfect market for that, where it controls, basically, the Superstore accounts for almost 10% of all cannabis sales in the state.
Wow. Even with Vegas desolate for the last few months, I'm wondering, I guess they're still doing well. People are going there and having a good time.
Yeah, they're still doing well. So I do like that business, because this is cannabis is kind of interesting, especially for different kind of approaches that everyone has. There's a company up in Canada that went with the record store model. Everyone's trying to make these different sort of experiences to bring in consumers and have them stay for a much longer period of time. Planet 13 has a better model, I believe, a better mousetrap built, because not only do you go in and you can go to the dispensary, but then there is a cafe, there's a restaurant, there's an art museum that's specifically designed for being on cannabis. That's going to keep your customers on site. They don't have to go, and especially if you've been to Las Vegas in July, right? No one wants to go outside. That's why the casinos have the trains. So I like that model, and I like that company, and I think there's a lot of upside as it continues to expand into new locations beyond just Nevada and Las Vegas.
I think their earnings are today or tomorrow. Do you like waiting to see how that shakes out, or do you like jumping in before earnings, even though there's been a bit of a little run up?
I mean, it depends on your risk tolerance. I'm always one that I like to go in before earnings, especially if I think that it's going to be a good report. I also have a tendency to follow trends of earnings. So I'll look at how companies perform on earnings. Cannabis companies are a little bit difficult. It's all kind of wonky at the moment, but you can do that. You can sit there and analyze like how a company performs on every single quarterly report, and you'll actually identify trends. But this is a company, $3 and change. I liked it at $1.50. It was one of the best performing cannabis stocks in 2019, it was able to fend off that bear market that hurt so many other multi-state operators. And I still think it's got some nice upside ahead, especially at this price.
Great. All right. So those are the ones that I follow a little bit that I wanted to touch base on. What are some other stocks I haven't mentioned that you've been watching and have thoughts either positive or negative?
I always say the other one that I think all cannabis investors should have exposure to, Innovative Industrial Properties. This is one of the companies that pays a dividend in the cannabis space. Same thing as GrowGeneration. As that medicinal market continues to expand, Innovative Industrial Properties will expand its footprint. Now it's increased its dividend over the last few years by 600%. Can't ignore that. Shares are much more expensive. We're talking around $122, but you're getting about like a 4% dividend yield. And as you hold a company like that, over time, that dividend reinvestment program, that compounding, that's what's really going to accelerate those returns. Now, on top of that, Innovative Industrial has a tendency to move opposite the industry, or at least be a little bit more stable. So if the industry, the sector begins to sell off, a lot of people will flood into IIPR because of that dividend, because it has this sort of safety. So that's one that I always think everybody should have in their pocket, like with Canopy, just because these are two companies that do very well and expand their footprint. I think the multi-state operators, Curaleaf, Green Thumb, Cresco, these are all very, very interesting opportunities right now. I mean, think right now, Trulieve, Green Thumb, Curaleaf, Cresco, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 in terms of revenue in the cannabis industry. Everybody focuses on Canopy, Aurora, Aphria because of it's legal up in Canada. Those are the largest companies in terms of market cap, but those American multi-state operators have the most in terms of revenue. And you're seeing that revenue accelerate. Now, as they begin to build out, we'll see profits, their cash position continue to improve. And that really helps drive share price higher. When talking about that, I always think about Tesla, right? For years, Tesla was a company that everyone's like, oh, it's never making money in EVs. It's just always a loss, always a loss, always a loss. Now it started turning a profit, and that profit is going to get bigger in 2021. And you can see what shares have done. That's what I think you have to keep in mind with those American multi-state operators, as well as any company in the space, that there's going to be a point where that profitability really kicks in and those shares will take off in turn. So those companies I really like. For me, for the rest of the year, with this election on the horizon, I'm very interested in the MSOs and continuing to follow them because I really don't think that they have topped out. And like I said, Trulieve is probably the most expensive of the MSOs at the moment, a little over 22, Green Thumb right around 15, Curaleaf and Cresco below 10. Those are great opportunities. And if you have access to those companies, if you have the ability to invest in those companies, that I think is going to provide some really great returns, not only for the rest of this year, but for the next few years to come. Because I think about the cannabis space as, this multi-year investment. Look at it that you have 5 to 10 years. In 2012, there were only 2 recreational markets and 12 medicinal markets here in the United States. Now we have 12 adult use markets, 11 states in the District of Columbia, as well as 37 medicinal markets, and all those other states that we talked about before. You've seen sales increase from just a few $100 million to over multiple billions. This year, we're talking $10 billion in adult use sales, with another $5 to $7 million in medicinal sales, $37 billion just over the next couple of years, and then what I believe, $80 billion by the end of the decade. So there's a lot of upside, and I think those MSOs are going to help lead that charge, especially here in the United States, because this will be a very big market. And I think it's big enough that you can have multiple majors divvy up the marketplace and perform well, because they're all going to have their different footprints, as well as you can have something like a Planet 13, where they're providing something more experiential that is different than what everybody else is doing. And that's going to drive in customers. You know, I'll just say there was an idea that someone recently asked me about cannabis vending machines, which is from one company. And I was like, you know, the technology is interesting. I don't know if that will actually take hold. But the thing is those kind of things are what bring in customers. Like there are alcohol and liquor vending machines. Now that doesn't account for most of their sales, but it does bring in eyeballs and it brings in word of mouth. It brings in branding, and that helps all of those companies.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought too, because you would think when vending machines are legal to be everywhere, they'll be in the same little bodega shops or wherever anyway, that product, you know what I mean? So yeah. I don't know if that'll take off as much as it'll be everywhere anyway at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Vending machines, the company that does it, their technology is Vicky, Internet of Things technology. It's very interesting. And I think the opportunity there it might be beyond just the cannabis industry, though. That's what its rights are for at the moment.
Right. All right. So before I hit you with our last question, first tell everyone where they can follow you and when you put out featured articles or the articles that you put out in Oxford Club, how can they follow you?
Well, I would first suggest checking out profittrends.com. That is the website where that is our free educational website. That's where I talk about cannabis. I'll talk about all these other technologies or innovations or disruptors that we really focus on, EVs, AI, all that kind of stuff, cryptocurrencies. So that would be the first place to have an introduction. And then I do a monthly newsletter, which is Strategic Trends Investor, where we do picks on different industries, as well as we have our reefer retirement portfolio, which is focused on investing in cannabis companies with the idea that this is a multi-year investment, that there are going to be bumps in the road, but that we're taking this long-term approach that you can put in a little bit of money now, and that 10 years from now, you're going to be in a much different place. And then I also have some more complicated VIP trading services. These are a little bit more expensive, but we do trade options on not only just cannabis companies, like we have a position in GrowGeneration at the moment, which we opened up on that pullback, right? They made that big pullback, and I was like, this is a great opportunity to buy shares of this company, you know, after this almost 40% decline from those highs. Those are the Viper Alert, Dynamic Fortunes, and Trailblazer Pro. Each of those focus on different systems, but I'd always suggest everybody check out profittrends.com first, because that's where we do that. And then we also have a YouTube channel where we will talk about what we talk about in Profit Trends, but as well as cannabis and crypto and all that kind of stuff.
That's great. All valuable stuff that everyone should check out. All right, last question. We talked about a whole bunch of different stocks. You gave us thoughts on different parts of the industry. But if I had to pin you down and I told you your rule is you could only invest in one stock right now in the cannabis sector, which one are you picking?
That's a tough one.
You can only pick one. Don't hedge it. Just give me one.
So if I could only do one, oh man, I think if I could only do one right now, I would still have to go with Canopy, and that is because of that international footprint. Like if this is something where I had to buy and hold for the next 10 years, that's what I would have to go with, because they've expanded to, you know, almost 24 countries, more than 24 countries. They have these rights. Canada has the jump on the US in terms of exporting to all those different markets. So that's where I would have where I'd have to focus. And because of their branding, because of all the different aspects they have, and they have a new CEO who is reining in all of that spending that took place before, they would be the only one. That's where I would go. Excellent. I would have to go.
I hear you, my friend. I hear you. Well, thank you so much, Matthew Carr, for being a guest again. We can't wait to talk to you soon. Have a great day, and thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thank you for having me again. Anytime.
And we will see everyone next time on the Pot.Live podcast. Have you visited MJ.com? MJ.com is the online destination where you can find everything you need to know about the emerging legal marijuana industry. Where else can you find the latest original content, news, and trends? Connect to a local doctor to obtain your medical marijuana card, receive exclusive brand savings, and have your favorite product delivered straight to your front door? MJ.com has it all. Go check them out.